Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. You must be like so craving the pleasure right now that you're coming on to listen to the show. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for craving the pleasure, because pleasure is really important that we have that. It reminds us that we're not in drama, trauma, or trying to survive something that's going on, some major stressor. So pleasure is a great indicator, and the desire to have pleasure is a great indicator that you're on track, you're healing, your body is ready to have greatness. So why do I talk about these things? So as a psychology coach and a holistic health practitioner holistic health practitioner, 18 years, I don't even know anymore, guys. I don't even count it. It's been a while. 20, I don't know. Anyway, so however long it's been, and having been the host of the Pleasure Zone for over 10 years now, I have to say, I have talked a lot about pleasure and different things and different kinks. And tonight's kink is going to be the kink of modesty. Ooh, I know what, there's such a thing. Yes, it is actually, there's kink of modesty, there's pornography related to modesty, and there is a whole conversation that if you actually go and you Google pornography and modesty, that you're going to find a whole bunch of articles on about pornography and the value of modesty, and then you're going to find articles that talk about modesty as being part of rape culture. Then you're going to find other articles that indicate that modesty perpetuates women being under control, and that pornography does the same thing, so they're related. So I'm not talking about any of that. I'm actually going to be talking about it from a consensual place, from a fun place, from a pleasurable place, from a kinky place. But I do want you to know that I am aware that there are a lot of perspectives out there about, what modesty is, especially culturally. A lot of cultures require modesty, and some people are fetishizing the cultures that require modesty. And if you are in one of those cultures and you are feeling like that is like it's invasive to you, then I would just encourage you not to put your stuff up on the internet, because even if you are in a culture that requires you to wear clothes that are modest, and you're putting your face or your body out on the internet and people are looking at that and they are fetishizing you, you've put yourself out there. So yes, you didn't give permission for them to fetishize you, but you did make yourself available for people to find you. So if you don't want people to look at you, your best bet is to not put your face out there, because people will fetishize anything. I'm wearing glasses right now. There's like a whole fetish for women who wear glasses and men who wear for people who wear glasses. So, if you happen to be watching this on one of the videos rather than just the audio streaming platforms, and you're seeing me with glasses and you're like, wow, that's hot stuff. I actually really like these glasses, so I think I look hot in them. I get it. I do me because of my glasses. So absolutely, there are people getting it on, getting fetishized for all kinds of things. And if I didn't want to be fetishized for these things, or be fetishized at all, I probably wouldn't put my face out to the world so that people could do that. Just letting you know. About. All right, so that aside, what's modesty? Modesty, from my understanding, and you can go look it up, and you can go look up the Wikipedia on that. So modesty is generally, to me, about how you would cover parts of your body, all parts of your body, so that you are not becoming, you're not sexually objectifying yourself, right? So, or that you'd be sexually objectified, although we know that regardless of what you wear, you're going to get sexually objectified because it's what human nature does. So yes, we could tell people to stop feeling horny or turned on. We could try, but we're not going to. So what's our other option? How can you have fun with it? No, only if I don't say, I want to say only if that's something that you're okay with, right? So if you're really not okay with it, just don't put yourself out in the way that you're going to be objectified. And if you really are like, hey, you know what? I'm okay with like doing my modesty thing and having people like get turned on by that, cool. Not only can you do that, you can also find ways and sites that are dedicated to that and dedicated to the fetish of modesty. And you can make money from it. So we might get into talking about that. Although in a lot of places in the world, you're allowed to sell things that are sexual or sex, but you're not allowed to buy it. So it's really tricky. And in some parts of the world, you can't do either. So this is not necessarily going to be fair to the entire world. However, there are places everywhere in the world where modesty can be considered a fetish. Even in, hot countries where people aren't wearing a lot of clothes, modesty can actually be quite alluring and sort of exotic or erotic because it may not be something they see all the time. So if you're in a country where people are wearing shorts and bikinis all the time and somebody walks in with a Victorian gown, you might be like, wow, that's fascinating. And it may actually turn you on because it's unusual and it's different and it's more curious, like what's under those clothes. So why is modesty, the idea that you're going to, cover your body so that you're not showing anything off? Why is that on the rise? Like, what is going on that we have modesty on the rise? And not that just modesty's on the rise, but the desire to look at things that are fetishized around that. So we'll call it pornography because that's what's going to get me the views, peoples. So, but it's actually the fetish really of modesty. So why is that on the rise? So a few things, I think, these are just in my humble opinions, because I really couldn't find anything that was the concrete research dedicated to this. So my first thought is we have actually been just overrun by seeing a lot of, it's just so easy to access porn these days, so easy to access nudity, and we could call it like vulgar sexuality, vulgar sex. Like people are just not liking the vulgarness anymore, and whatever that means to you, because everybody's view of vulgar could be different. So their level of vulgarity could be really high to people. So what are they going to do? They're going to swing the pendulum the opposite direction to modesty. And so things like looking at women with, knee-high white stockings on may be more enticing than seeing somebody naked or watching, somebody masturbate. It might be more sexy to watch somebody put on that white stocking because it's not something you get to see all the time. And it's almost like we've been so overly almost desensitized to the overt sexual stuff that now we're kind of going, well, let's see what's more enticing and interesting. Like I have to say, seeing a man in a suit is really hot. And like seeing even like women dressed in like period clothing. Like I love watching things to do with women in 1950s clothing. Anytime I can watch an era, something to do with different eras, like early 1900s, late 1800s, 1940s, 1950s, where The clothing is phenomenal. I like the style, not necessarily the attitudes of the people of those eras. Although some eras there was some openness, and then, world wars came along and took that openness away. We're kind of going through something similar right now, where we had a time where, things were okay with being who you are, and now it's not, and there's this whole backlash. So this has happened many times over historically. And this is also connecting to, how do we show up in the world? And, as there was the rise of the hemline in the early 1900s, just showing your ankles was very, very sexy. And so porn from the early 1900s was very different than what we have now. And yes, sometimes you'd see breasts, you might see full nudity, but you weren't necessarily seeing like people masturbating. You weren't seeing the things you would see in Hustler in the 70s and 80s. You were seeing what was considered on the edge of naughty at the time, which was like, here's the ankles, here's the knees. Oh, you can see the breeches. Oh, there's some cleavage. Oops, there might be a nipple, which could be pretty outrageous. So these values of these simpler times are starting to, I think, come back to people. People are looking at things like homesteading. Like, maybe it's just me, but my feed on social media is filled with things like homesteading, uh, all things modesty related. So that's why this show came up, because I am currently being bombarded with this. That, and I'm being bombarded with things for elderly ladies, because apparently, as I'm turning 50 soon, I'm considered elderly, which blows my mind. I'm 17 at heart, so getting shoes for elderly ladies so they can walk properly in the winter. And it's like, weird stuff. Is your vagina dry? Not really, but thanks for asking. So yeah, all that's happening on my feed, along with all things to do with not just modesty, but all things to do with homesteading and Victorian values. And it's really wild to me, because the content I put out is not related to Victorian values and that sort of stuff. But I also do love watching documentaries and all things to do with history. And the shows that I watch are like early 1900s shows are my favorite for sure. So probably my algorithm knows that about me and is just trying to entice me with things. So why is modesty so exciting? I think it's really because we are looking for something different. And to me, as long as, and I know you guys have heard me say this not once, but probably over 400 times or more, because I say it at least once a show, consent is very important. So, if you are taking modesty photos where you're dressed, maybe in a 1920s, what would have been at the time, probably lingerie, which to us now looks like summer dresses. If you're dressed in those with, your 1920s beautiful boot shoes, beautiful clothing, and, your fantastic early 1900s, maybe Edwardian period stuff, maybe post that, who knows, somewhere, anywhere from the 1890s to the 1920s, you're going to get a whole range of different fashion and styles and sexiness happening. And I bet anybody who's got a flair or an eye for the artistic probably finds that very attractive, because there's so much history and so much fascination with style and glamour of the day, that there may be that too, the idea of the glamour of like early Hollywood, even though there was a whole bunch of not glamour that happened too, but we're just going for the stuff that might be enticing. So all that sort of energy, going back to simpler times, right? So people are really attracted to that. And some also in the last few years, you might have noticed that there's been a very big trend towards going extra religious. So if you were even like a little religious before, you may have tipped the scaling on extra religious. And a lot of, if you are religious, you're going to probably find that a lot of texts that you're reading are in favor of modesty. So there are those values that come in as well. There are societal values that are coming in that are also, we're kind of going through a phase of um, like an extreme, well, in North America anyway, we're kind of going through this extreme um, polarity that's happening between conservatives and liberals, and this fight that's happening. So, the conservatives, when they're weighing higher, bring us into more of these values that are modesty values. And then you got liberals going, screw that, I just want to run around naked. And man, I have all those values in me because I really don't consider myself politically bound to any party. I consider it to be more like, how do I feel about life? So if you are feeling like very strongly connected to certain beliefs, certain value systems, then you'll probably find things like what I'm calling modesty porn or modesty kink to be very, very attractive. So we're going to talk more about like what's in that realm of modesty kink and like how can you get involved in that if that's something you want to get involved in. We'll talk about that when we come back from this commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Today we are actually talking about, I put modesty pornography up there because a lot of it has to do with pictures that people like to look at or images. However, it's actually modesty kink. But I knew that the algorithms were either going to love me or hate me for the word pornography and what constitutes that. A lot of it is, I think, fascinating. And actually, I was just talking with a friend the other day who came to visit and was like, I think I'm going to start doing foot pictures and selling them. And I'm like, good for you. I said, you know what else you could do? You could do modesty pictures. And that blew her mind. And she was all over that because she is got tons of costumes where she could actually go and do an entire and set designs and all kinds of things. And she could just be like majorly into modesty kinks. So absolutely, if this is something that you're not only okay with, but you're excited about, and your partner is excited about it, if you have a partner, or if you want to be in the world of kink, there is actually a site called Modest Kink or Modesty Kink. Either way, check it out. And you will find all kinds of things on there. You can even get so specific. Like, to me, foot kinks are very modest. Like, you're just showing off your feet. However, in some cultures, that might not be considered modest. So keep in mind that my idea of modesty and somebody else's idea of modesty might not be the same. And if somebody likes to look at your feet in boots and they're covered, is that modest? Well, I would think so. Again, depends on what your values are. So I think looking at feet in super sexy, like black leather high heels or like super sexy boots, it's hot, right? I don't know a lot of people who don't find it attractive. I don't like to necessarily look at feet that are uncovered, but I like really good shoes, and I love to look at feet in good shoes. Doesn't mean that I'm like masturbating over them, but I definitely can find beauty in them. And there are definitely people out there, might be you, who can look at those and absolutely get turned on to the point of orgasm just by being in the presence of beautifully, booted, shoed feet, stockings, maybe. All of that, to me, is under the modesty realm. So even things like wearing beautiful hats and taking photos of that, and that could be part of a modesty kink. The more you're covering up and the more different ways you're covering up can absolutely be part of the modesty kink. So who's into this modesty kink? Well, surprisingly, it's not just men. It's everybody from all walks of life, from all genders, all religions. There's modesty kink that is attractive to literally everybody. So one of the concerns that a lot of people have is that they're intentionally being modest, so they're not being sexualized. Unfortunately, the thing is that even if you try not to be sexualized, it doesn't matter how much you dress up and how much you cover, people will still be sexualized. There will still be sexual harassment in countries where people are completely covered from head to toe and are only showing their eyes. There is still rape happening in those countries. So you could try your darndest. You could even probably put yourself in in a bubble that they'd have to like stab their way through it with something. If somebody has the intention of being a violent, of being a rapist, of being violent, of violating bodies, they're going to find a way no matter what you're wearing. And I remember in the 80s, I remember hearing this so often. Oh, and I think it was like even all over the news, and like people were reporting rapes. It could be like a woman got raped on the street. Maybe she was even a prostitute. And then well, the judges would come across, well, what were you wearing? Oh, well, you brought that on yourself. Oh, you didn't. But what I'm saying now is, like, if you don't want people to see you, we have a lot more ways to hide, right? So back then we were actually hidden even more because we weren't all over social media. So if you don't want people to see you, just please remember that your images, no matter what you do, are going to be there forever. So whether you're being modest or you're being immodest, your images are going to be out to the world. So be aware of that. And they have nothing to do with whether somebody sexualizes you, right? But if you don't want to be sexualized, you kind of got to hide, because the world is going to sexualize you. It's the way it works. I think, and people even sexualize nuns. Therefore, there are nun habits out there that you can get at the sex shops. Like, people are sexualized. This is what happens. There is a kink for everything. And does that make people sick? No. What makes people sick is when they're into non-consent, when they're into underage, when they're into anything that doesn't involve consent, or it is with people who cannot consent. So underage cannot consent, somebody with disabilities who cannot consent, any of that. So that is sick. That includes people who have died. They can't consent either. So coming up to Halloween this time of year, I'm definitely not doing a show on necrophilia. However, I don't think it matters. No matter what, there will always be somebody who will sexualize. Sometimes, even when I show up as my scrappiest and what I think is my least possibly attractive, is when I often get the most like feedback. Oh, you're so cute, and like when you're so like I don't know, genuinely raw or something. Like, I could intentionally try to not look sexual and it won't matter. And it's not that I'm not like a super hottie, right? It's just the way that the world is. So if you're getting unwanted attention, just remember, if you're in the public eye, like I am for my show, you can actually see me, you can hear me. I often get that kind of response. And if I didn't want to, then I would need to change the way that I get my message out to the world. Something to think about. So modesty has not actually stopped anything like sexual violence or any of that from sexual harassment from happening. It kind of doesn't matter. I have a friend who's Amish, and I actually one day watched a guy say like really inappropriate things to her. And I was like, are you kidding me? This woman has a bonnet on and like 3 layers of dress on, and you're like being like funny with her. Like you're alluding to sexual things with her. She's never going to see the show because she's Amish. So there you go. But I'm just mentioning it, not mentioning her name. So yeah, it happens all the time. And why are people interested in that? Well, I think they think that there is something to do with innocence as well, right? So the modesty equals innocence. So, and trust me, this friend of mine is so not innocent. She's fabulous. She's a rebel. And it is something to see when you're like, this woman didn't even give you a hint or a reason to flirt with her, yet you insist that you think you should, because you think you have not only a right to, but you desire it, so therefore she's supposed to desire it, even though it's not even in her thought at all. So no matter what, you're going to find those people in the world who, no matter how modest you are, that is and can still come at you, right? Is and still could. So putting all of that out as an awareness and putting it kind of aside so we can actually go dive deep into the joy of what can be created from modesty. So yes, if you are walking around with clothing that is, whether it's the 1950s, which is such a great look, like the clothing, not the values necessarily, right? Like the 1950s didn't necessarily have the greatest values towards women, not a lot of rights, not a lot of a lot of things that could have been improved on, right? And the clothing, though, was quite stunning. So what, how can you use that to have fun? And, the pinup girls of the 1950s in their beautiful bathing suits that to us would be quite covered. And, sometimes they had like the little skirt things that went with them. And you think of Marilyn Monroe, and she was really out there. She was definitely not modest in her day, but compared to what a lot of people wear now, she was probably quite modest. And she's still, even in her death, a sex icon, right? And her, especially if you think about her in her white dress, standing over the grate with all of the air blowing up, right? That probably was my grandfather's favorite. He had a thing for Marilyn Monroe, like you can't imagine. And actually my grandpa, who was a doctor, had art photos around the house that we knew they were art, but they could have been construed as pornography. So like, what's the difference, right? And I did do a show a number of years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, about the difference between what is pornography compared to art. Like, how do you know the difference? And these photos that my grandpa had, the one that I can remember, I think it's probably still at my grandparents' cottage, my uncle now has, but there's a photo of a woman who stands in a lake, and the lake is calm. And she's actually covering like her breasts and her genital, like all you can see is her silhouette. And it's beautiful. There's curves, there's smooth lines, her hair's fantastic. And it would have probably been at the time, probably taken in the 30s or 40s, that photo. Probably would have been quite racy, artistic maybe. And at the same time, she's hiding parts of herself, so a little bit modest. However, she's not totally clothed. It's the edge of who knows what, right? So this brings me back to like, what is it about having your clothes on that's so exciting? Well, we're going to find out, because I'm going to go on and dive into that in my own brain. Like, why is that sexy? All right. We'll talk about that when we come back from this commercial break. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. So tonight we're talking about modesty as a kink, and what some of the things you might find fascinating about modesty, or why would that turn people on? So modesty itself to me is just a really good indicator that people are looking for something totally different than what we've been experiencing in porn, especially since like the rise of websites in the 90s. And I remember in the early 90s, I had a friend who was developing websites, and there were things he showed me on websites that I didn't even know existed, because pornography was so huge. It was like one of the top ways you could make money in tech at the time. And now that's kind of dying off. I mean, there's always still money to be made in the sex industry, but people are putting it out there for free. So the thing is, putting it out there for free isn't, especially just like sending pictures to people or for free, like I, get those myself. If you're getting it for free, the chances are you're not going to go off and look and buy it somewhere else. So I think, what's happening now is this interest of something different. You're going back to the simpler times. Is actually getting really exciting to people, because they're looking at, modesty and classy is kind of the same thing. And they're looking for people to have like those silhouettes of those times, like the 1950s silhouette where it was the hourglass figure, or, the Victorian silhouette where you had, well, there was many Victorian silhouettes, but those different silhouettes that created different shapes that emphasized different parts of bodies that were really fascinating to look at. There's beauty in them. There's a sort of, I don't know, nostalgia maybe is what we're looking at too. So I think there is a lot of, feelings about nostalgia that come through. And why is that attractive? So longing for those times, but also feeling like maybe you want to be part of an era part of an era that you didn't get to live through, but you're romanticizing, because you didn't have to also live through all the judgment, criticism, all the lack that was also probably happening. But you might be really into the clothing or the looks or some of that stuff that was happening. So all of that could be just intriguing, just that yearning for something different, that fascination of maybe stories you've heard from, your grandparents, your great grandparents. And pictures of my grandparents, they always looked so classy. Like they could be at a family function and it could just be like a beach day and everybody was dressed up and looked fabulous. Like my grandmother always looked fabulous. Like even if she went to the grocery store, she did her makeup. She always had to wear a dress that was always ironed. Like she was very, very proper. And then I have a rebellious mom, so we don't do that in our house. But I totally have full respect for anybody who still does that. I think it's fascinating and like lovely. I think one of the problems though is that some people find that kind of culture is repressive, or that women aren't choosing to do that. I know my grandma fully chose to do that. Fully, absolutely loved it. She had sisters who didn't do that. So I know it wasn't like a thing where you had to. It was the day and age. It was my grandma loved it. She loved a reason to dress up and get fancy and feel good. And so I think that's empowering, right? And a lot of people, when I'm looking at these sites, are saying that modesty is connected to control and other, yeah, there's modesty is such an interesting word, and it definitely creates a lot of buzz. So whether you're for modesty or against modesty, I'd like you to just consider like what are some of the things that you do watch on TV? Like for me, I'm telling you about my favorite, one of my very favorite shows is Murdoch Mysteries, filmed in Canada. And it's filmed, the era is like late 1800s, 1890s, right into the early 1900s. And the clothing on there is amazing. Like I could look at Murdoch all day, every day in his suit and bowler hat and find that 1,000 times more attractive than a fully naked man. That is a look. I love it. I find it super hot. So yeah, I'm a little weirdo, and maybe I do secretly have a kink for, early Edwardian period clothes. I don't know. Late Victorian, early Edwardian. I don't know, but I love it. So if you are doing this by your choice and you enjoy it, that's empowering. That's the difference. If you're doing it because you live in a culture that tells you you have to do this, or you take your niqab off or your hijab off and you could be harmed, or if you live in another culture where maybe there's some kind of covering going on, if you are in a position where you have to do that, or you either get arrested or you get killed, that is not empowering. That is control. If you're doing it by choice and you love it and it makes you feel good about yourself and your body, that's sexy because it's empowering. And when you're empowered, you are sexy. So yes, you may walk down the street very modest, in very modest clothing, and you may feel really good about yourself. That will make you attractive. And because you're attractive, you might pull in attention. And now it's your choice how you respond to that attention. Because you're empowered, you can respond how you like. And, if you want to be not only empowered, but learn how to defend yourself in case of idiots, absolutely. I'm a big fan of learning how to defend yourself. Did martial arts for years, taught it for a while. So I think that one of our main things to do is do the thing that empowers you the most. And if you want to get on a website like Modesty Kink and take some photos in your modest, dressed modestly, maybe you're doing the 1940s look, which is one of my favorites, is the 40s look, 20s as well, because I actually very much have a flapper, the perfect kind of silhouette for flapper clothes. And I think it's just beautiful. And if you're feeling that kind of beautiful and you want to share that with the world, and by all means be empowered by people paying for that, congratulations for you. There are specific kinks that are like the shoes, the hands, like wearing gloves, also modest for the hands, wearing boots, different things like that. So you can take it down to different actual body parts very specifically, and have modesty geared towards those specific parts, whether it's wearing something over your head, covering your eyes, maybe you're wearing sunglasses, maybe you're just doing all of it, right? And you're entirely being modest from head to toe. Maybe you've even got your ankles covered, and maybe you feel really great like that. I think it's beautiful. Like, if this makes you really happy and you enjoy it and love it, all the power to you. And even to the people out there who are like, well, why would you encourage modesty? And why would you encourage people to get on websites and take pictures of themselves and blah, 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 blah. If I had a picture of myself dressed in, say, Edwardian period clothes on a website for Modesty Kink, and it's sitting there and I'm fully clothed and it's sitting there for the next 100 years, I am totally fine with that. Now, if I had a picture of me masturbating out on some other website, and it's going to be up there for another 100 years where my grandchildren could see it, yeah, I'm not interested in that. But if my grandchildren want to see me and go, oh, look what grandma did. Grandma got paid for taking pictures in, period clothing, and people like love that and we're into that, and good for grandma. Like, I would think that I'm going to raise children my kid, who, if ever has children or adopts children, raises those kids to be like, heck yeah, grandma, look at you in your modesty gear making money. maybe it's different values, but if, if you're feeling great and you can make money doing that, all the power to you. So you can absolutely look up different websites that are geared towards different body parts, whether it's hand fetishes or foot fetishes. And within those websites, you're going to find different categories, whether it's, feet that are bare naked, feet with stockings, feet with shoes, feet with boots. You're going to find all kinds of options in there. And if you're comfortable with that, and if it, not only if you're comfortable, but if it excites you and you love it, go for it. So am I promoting pornography? In a way, yes. I'm promoting that you are doing something that you would not be ashamed of in the future. If it's something that you feel like you could possibly look back and regret, don't do it. If you are looking at this and going, I would never regret putting my foot pictures out to the world. I think they're fabulous and I love my feet and I hope other people do too. And if you feel good about that and you won't regret it, then do it. But if you're going to regret it, don't do it. I think that's where it crosses the line for me with when it comes to making, creating, and putting out porn is you have to look at, yourself. Like, so I like to project myself into the future and ask, like, what will I feel like in 5 years about this, or 10 years, or my family and generations, like 100 years, how would they feel about this? Like, if it's something that I wouldn't be proud of in 5 years, I'm not going to do it. If it's something that I would fully be proud of in 5 years, I will probably do it. So just something to think about before jumping the gun, starting into modesty kink pictures, putting them up on the modesty kink websites. Would you be proud of it? Are you comfortable with it? Would you show it to your kids? Would you show the same picture to your kids? It wouldn't be in the same context, right? Because whoever's looking at your picture on that site is using it for kink and sexual pleasure. Your children might just go, wow, that's a beautiful photo. Different context for the different pictures. So something to think about. We're going to head to our last commercial break here on Inspired Choices Network. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. So I am surprised that there isn't more information out there about modesty kink, but I do know it exists, and there are niches, and you just kind of got to do your dives and find out where those things are. And if you're wanting to get involved or have play related to modesty kink is probably one of the easiest things to play in, because people won't usually object to putting on different clothes. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they will. I wouldn't object. You want to send me a beautiful dress that's like got the 1950s style, and I will take photos of myself in it for you? Heck yeah. DM me. I will give you my address to mail that. Actually, I'll give you my PO box. You can mail it there. So happy to wear any modesty dresses you've got out there for me, guys. If you're really into modesty porn, happy to wear any high heels you send me too. I will take photos in those too. I'm a size 10. All right, just letting you know. So to me, I think modesty porn is not only porn, modesty kink. It can be incredibly beautiful. It can be incredibly fun. I think one of the things that it's being, there's like an issue going on with a lot of people with this is that they think that it's like weird for some reason. They're like, why would you be into that? It's like so boring, blah, blah. I don't really care if somebody finds it boring. It's that if they love it, if it's turning them on, if it's safe, it's not harming anybody, it's consensual, you're good. So I was going to go somewhere with that. And I obviously went off track. So going back on track to look at how, I think how do we actually get like connected, right? Like how do we get people connected into these different areas? And you can search that up for sure too. There are, and I think too, if you are on dating sites, you want to maybe mention that you are into modesty. There is a whole thing called the trad wife, trad life. So traditional wife, traditional life. There tends to be a lot of modesty that is involved with that. So if you are, I would say that that's a lifestyle. However, that there probably is a kink that goes along with that trad wife, trad life situation where the modesty is a turn on. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in too, and a lot of women who are even highly educated women are going into the trad wife, trad life, traditional life scenarios because they're finding it a lot easier. They are, even though they might have like 2 degrees or like even they might be, PhDs, they're saying like, this is actually what I really want to do is raise my family and be at home. And if they're choosing that and they love it, that's empowering. So we can't take that away from them by saying, you're taking women's lib back 100 years. They're actually, what's liberating is to do what you love, be able to do what you love, and have the freedom to choose. That's liberating. So whether you're choosing traditional life, or you're choosing to go out there and have a career, or whatever you happen to be choosing, if you're choosing to be modest and that turns you on, and you're feeling like very, like that complements your life, maybe there is a lifestyle in it for you. I think even like going to the point of looking into the different, there are different groups for traditional families too. Like a lot of them are Christian based, right? So if you're in, or even, so I should say religious based. So probably if you are more avidly going to worship, wherever you go to worship, you're probably going to find other people going there regularly who have similar lifestyles that you have. So if you're going to church on a regular basis, you're going to mosque, or if you're, wherever you happen to be going on a regular basis, then you probably will find people who have similar values to you, and that traditional lifestyle will probably be something that you find common among the people that you're worshiping with. And so, having them as friends is probably a really good choice. So to wrap it up, let's reiterate, I think, and this is just my sweet opinion, that modesty kink can be a lot of fun and incredibly empowering if it's something that you are choosing for you and for your partner, if your partner's really into it too. I think there's a whole world to be explored. And think about all the costumes you can have. Like your entire closet could be filled with clothes from different eras. Like, that's fun.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.